The sun was just peeking over the airport, when it was still quiet and cold outside. Inside the terminal, Ibrahim Traoré waited calmly near gate 37. He wasn't dressed in a suit, he had no bodyguards, and he carried nothing flashy. To most onlookers, he appeared to be just another African traveler, but he was far from ordinary. Ibrahim Traoré was the president of Burkina Faso. He preferred to travel humbly and quietly, without cameras or loud announcements. This was how he liked to move discreet, with the people in mind. His recent trip from Europe, where he had held talks on gold, sovereignty, and Africa's future, was over. Now all he wanted was to get home. As he headed toward the Air France flight to Ouagadougou, he nodded and smiled at a worker in French. Bonjour, ça va? The worker smiled back, unaware of his true identity. This suited Traoré perfectly. He quietly boarded the plane, nodded politely to the crew, and took his seat in business class. By the window, no one paid him much attention, or so he thought. Just a few rows behind, whispers started to spread. A prominent French businessman, CEO of a major energy firm, was also heading to Burkina Faso. He was used to VIP treatmented carpets, champagne, first-class seats, but at the gate, the airline told him business class was full. The CEO was not happy. He wouldn't accept that. That's when problems began. At first, it was just a small demand, but it would grow into something bigger. The French CEO didn't like hearing no. Standing at the gate, he tapped his polished shoes impatiently. Surrounded by assistants and airline staff, he boasted about his role in many African projects, acting like rules didn't apply to him. He demanded an upgrade right away. The gate staff hurried to respond, whispering and checking their tablets, but deep down, they knew the truth. Business class was full. Every seat was taken. Still, the CEO insisted. That's when a senior flight attendant was called over. Her name was Claire. She was tall, white, and dressed in the airline's uniform. She wore a cold, tight smile as she walked onto the plane to solve the issue. Inside, she scanned the cabin sharply, like she was looking for someone. Her eyes paused when she saw a man in C2A. Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly, reading something on his phone. As calm as ever, she looked again. No fancy watch, no assistant, no sign of power, just a black man in a hood. She leaned toward another attendant, and quietly said she might have made a mistake. She then walked over to him, first a smile, and asked politely but firmly, "May I see your boarding pass?" Traoré looked up, nodded, and handed it over. She stared at the pass, then back at him. The seat number was correct, but something didn't sit right with her. In her eyes, he didn't look like someone who belonged in that seat. Moments later, she returned with a fake smile, more direct this time. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we may need to move you to economy to make room for another passenger. We will compensate you." The insult was clear but quiet. Ibrahim raised an eyebrow. "And why me?" he asked calmly. "No reason, sir," she replied, trying to stay composed. "Just a small change for our guest," she added. "A guest more important than me?" he asked, still calm. Claire didn't answer. She just smiled faintly. Other passengers looked over, sensing something was wrong. No one said a word. Ibrahim sat quietly, refusing to stand. "No, I will stay in my seat," he said calmly. The tension grew, but the real storm hadn't arrived yet. Claire stared in shock. A man like him saying no to her. She thought that was rare for her, especially with an African passenger on her shift. She forced a polite smile, but her pride was wounded. "Sir, I must insist. This is for operational reasons," she said with a colder tone. Traoré didn't flinch. He held her gaze. If it's operational, then why am I being singled out? Claire hesitated. She wasn't ready for this quiet defiance. A few business-class passengers began to notice. One lowered his newspaper. A woman stopped typing on her laptop. Something was off, but no one spoke. No one dared. The CEO hadn't come on board yet. He was being held at the gate until a seat was sorted. Claire hurried to the cockpit, whispered something to the pilot, then came back with a final word. She didn't address Traoré this time. Instead, she moved toward another black man in business class, then another. It was clear she was targeting those who seemed out of place. That was her second mistake. Traoré sat her day quietly, watching with a blank face. His mind was sharp, focused. He observed everything, listening closely. The humiliation didn't anger him, it sharpened him. A young African man in his late 20s looked confused when Claire pointed at his seat. "You, sir, need to move to economy," the young man asked. "Why me?" Claire didn't answer. She only took his boarding pass. That's when Traoré stood up. "Enough," he said, voice steady but heavy with authority. "You're discriminating. You base your decisions on skin color." Claire's hands trembled slightly. "Sir, I must ask you to sit down. Please don't cause a scene." Traoré locked eyes with her. Her breath caught for a moment. His stare was steady, fearless, strong. She still didn't know who he truly was. To her, he was just another troublesome passenger. Frustration boiled inside her, but she kept walking. Inside, she muttered in French, "These people, always causing trouble." The CEO was finally on board. Claire greeted him politely, offering champagne. "We're fixing the seating issue," she said. Meanwhile, Traoré set her day back, fastened his seatbelt, and calmly tapped the armrest. He didn't need to speak because soon everyone would know what had happened and who had been insulted. The CEO settled into his seat like a king returning home. He didn't look at Ibrahim as he passed by. Claire made sure he was comfortable, adjusting his seat and offering towels and more champagne. The message was clear. You matter, that man does not. The plane started moving and soon soared into the sky, leaving friends behind. It carried a moment that would soon shake the nations. Inside the cabin, everything looked normal. Passengers relaxed. The seatbelt signs went off, but deep inside, something powerful was building, an unseen storm waiting to explode. Traoré stayed calm. He never complained, never raised his voice. He didn't call anyone or reveal who he was. He just sat her day quietly, watching everything unfold, knowing how it would end. Meanwhile, Claire felt the storm brewing beneath the surface. She avoided eye contact. His presence unsettled her, but she pushed the feeling aside. During the flight, she returned to his seat with a forced smile. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" He looked at her. "Water is fine." She quickly nodded and moved away. No apology, no courtesy, no respect. Yet, the CEO was treated like a star. Claire laughed at his jokes, leaned in when he spoke, and asked about his important work in Africa. He responded arrogantly, "Burkina Faso is lucky. We're bringing order to chaos." Claire nodded in agreement, unaware that she was sitting just 2 rows from the man he insulted. A woman nearby, an African nurse heading home to Bobo Dioulasso, saw everything. She shook her head and whispered to her neighbor, "That's our president. They don't even realize who they're humiliating." Her neighbor's eyes widened, but she said nothing. No one wanted to break the silence. As the president avoided attention, hours went by. The lights dimmed and most passengers fell asleep. Ibrahim Traoré stayed awake, gazing out at the clouds. He wasn't angry. He was patient. But when the plane touched down in Ouagadougou, that patience would end. The aircraft slowly approached the runway. Cabin lights flickered on. The pilot announced their arrival in both French and English. Passengers stretched and buckled their seatbelts, ready to land. Claire moved through the aisle with her clipboard, still smiling at the CEO, ignoring Ibrahim Traoré completely. Outside, the scenery was stunning. The sun shone over red earth, and the city below stirred to life. Yet, the growing convoy waiting at the airport was hidden from view. Rows of black SUVs, military vehicles, and a large escort lined the tarmac. Inside, quiet whispers started. "I see soldiers. Are we landing in a war zone?" asked a nervous passenger. "No," another replied. "That's standard military protocol. Maybe someone important is arriving." The French CEO smirked. "Must be for me," he joked to Claire. She laughed along, already planning to lead him off first. She even intended to escort him personally to the terminal. But before the plane stopped moving, everything changed. Through the window, passengers saw uniformed guards standing stiffly, guns at their sides. Behind them, top government officials waited in the heat. The defense minister, foreign minister, and security boss. They stood still, silent as statues. Claire peeked out and gasped. "What is this?" she whispered. The CEO puffed out his chest and smoothed his suit. Clearly, this was all for him. "I told you I'm involved in big projects here." But before anyone could leave the plane, a tall officer in a black beret stepped in. His boots clumped on the floor as he walked slowly down the aisle. He looked at every face he passed. When he reached seat 2A, he saluted perfectly. "More President. Welcome home." The cabin went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Claire's face went pale. Her eyes darted from the officers to the man. She had looked down on all flight. Her hands trembled. Ibrahim Traoré stood up calmly and quietly. His presence was proud and strong. No words were spoken. The CEO took a step back, mouth open. "Pre-President," that stammered. That is how the scene ended. Traoré turned and nodded slowly. No anger, no pride, just a man who no longer needed to speak. Another officer stepped forward, speaking coldly. "You two must come with us now," Claire whispered in shock. "Wait, what? Why me?" The officer's voice was firm. "You're being detained for questioning. You publicly disrespected the head of state on national soil. That's a serious offense." Claire glanced around nervously, trying to laugh it off. "This has to be a mistake. I was just doing my job." But no one listened. As Traoré stepped off the plane, his team greeted him, guards, ministers, and a cheering crowd behind the fence. Cameras clicked loudly. The leader had returned. But now, everyone knew the truth. He had walked among them as a normal man. Those who judged him on appearances would face the consequences. Back on the plane, Claire and the CEO were being led away in handcuffs. Passengers stared in shock as they disappeared down the steps, heads bowed. Their arrogance was shattered. This was only the start. The tarmac burned under the bright Burkina Faso sun. But everyone's eyes were on the two being escorted in cuffs. Claire, the flight attendant, and the French CEO. Their confident smiles vanished. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by panic and confusion. They were taken into separate black vehicles, guarded by elite presidential guards. Nobody said a word. The silence was louder than shouting. It was the quiet sound of power being reclaimed. Inside the terminal, President Ibrahim Traoré spoke calmly to a small group of reporters. His voice was steady, without anger but with sharp words. "In Burkina Faso, we do not judge by skin color. We do not bow to money or old colonial ways. We respect dignity, humanity, and our people. This is the new Africa." The news spread fast. Videos leaked online, clips of the arrest, images of soldiers saluting Traoré, footage of the CEO being dragged away like a child caught stealing. People on social media exploded. They demanded respect for Africa. The hashtag Housebroken trended worldwide. Young Africans cheered, celebrating a moment they would never forget. In the Ministry of Justice, Claire and the CEO faced charged public insult, discrimination against the head of state, disrespect on Burkina Faso soil, abuse of power, and attempted intimidation. The French embassy tried to step in. Phone calls and diplomatic requests flooded in, but Traoré was firm. This is a sovereign nation. No one is above the law. They would face justice like everyone else. Meanwhile, Air France hurried to control the damage. They issued a weak apology in 24 hours. Fumble filled, full of corporate words and empty regret. It wasn't enough. Citizens called for boycotts. Other African nations joined. Locked in a detention center outside Ouagadougou, Claire broke down in tears during questioning. "I didn't know who he was," she sobbed. "I was just doing my job." The officer's stare was cold. "You didn't need to know who he was. You only needed to treat him like a person." The CEO, fighting legal battles in Burkina Faso and France, tried to buy his way out, but the court responded strongly. No immunity, no special treatment. Justice must be fair. Traoré never mocked or gloated. He simply returned to his work building roads, helping young people, strengthening the military, protecting his land. But that moment on the plane became a legend. A quiet man in a haudier, a flight attendant with prejudice, a proud CEO blinded by ego,